How's it going, everyone? It is Drago. We're back with another fairy tale video, and this time we're talking about why Tartaros is such a standout arc within fairy tale. And it is also my favorite arc in the whole series. So going into this arc, you did have a definite sense of safety. This is one of the later arcs within fairy tale. And at this point, we had very little in terms of death and sacrifice within the show. And some of the biggest moments in terms of loss and death, you had Simon die, which, for the audience, it was very little impact on us because we had very little time with Simon, and I don't think he particularly stood out so insanely to, make us get fully emotional that he died, but it was more impactful for Urza and just the Tower of Heaven arc as a whole. And you had a few villain deaths throughout the arcs, a lot of them coming from Tartaros Island, but otherwise, besides that, there wasn't too many deaths within the series. And in terms of losing fights, Fairy Tail has always pretty much won every fight that they've been in. And, pretty much the only time before Tartaros that they actually legit lost something was on Tartaros Island when the guild lost to Acnologia and they had to do, Fairy Sphere to, save their lives. Besides that, we didn't have much for death and sacrifices within, the arcs. We had Makarov do a few fake outs a few times, but otherwise, pretty much everyone's stayed alive. And this arc in particular did put the guild through a lot of messed up things because pretty much all the arcs before this were all pretty lighthearted and fun. And this arc definitely does start out pretty lighthearted because, you start out with the Sun Village, which is a pretty fun little adventure that they all go on. Team Natsu, trying to find out the secrets of why the Sun Village was frozen, which was a pretty fun little adventure that they had, especially coming off of the insanely long arc that was the Grand Magic Games. And then you also, for anime wise, you came off of a filler arc at this point. And pretty much up to this point, we had a few demons show up in the show, Lullaby, Deliora, but the Sun Village in particular starts setting up the idea of a guild of demons and them using curses instead of magic. So kind of going back into Tartaros and how it added a lot more stakes and death and sacrifice, and obviously you don't need all those things to make it more standouty, but I think three moments in particular highlight how much stakes and kind of how much people had to put on the line for this arc. So the first being Natsu, finally meeting up with Igniel again, which had been Natsu's mission since the very first episode and very first chapter of the manga. And up until this point, we had 200 plus episodes with Natsu, and we've heard many stories from Natsu and, people around him of Igniel and his quest to find Igniel. And just to have it be revealed that Igniel was actually inside Natsu the whole time. Natsu's arguably kind of mad at his dad that, he basically abandoned him for a lot of the years of his life. And just to show up out of freaking nowhere and, say that he was actually within Natsu the whole time. But honestly, for Natsu's character, he gets over that pretty darn fast. And, he's honestly more happy to be reunited with his dad once again. And he honestly forgets about, you were within me the whole time? What the heck? Which honestly does lead to some of the coolest duo fighting in the whole series. Just the shots where Igniel and, Natsu are fighting together against Mardgeir and Acnologia. Those are some really cool shots, to be side by side. Also, kind of going into that fight, I also loved the moment where Igniel gives Natsu a job request to go fight Mardgeir and steal the Book of E&D. But Natsu's happiness to see his father was pretty darn short-lived, since Natsu witnesses Acnologia kill Igniel right in front of him, which is pretty painful to see Natsu's reaction to, since, he's not a character to cry. He gets mad that, other people make his friends cry and, he ends up punching them, but he's not someone himself to really cry. And, seeing him cry over Igniel's death is pretty darn sad. He is really broken at that moment. But I do really like, that it kind of didn't end on a really sad note because, you get Igniel being able to give a few more words to Natsu to be able to motivate him to, move on past Igniel's death and be able to protect his friends. Even if Natsu took it a tad bit too literal and he literally left the guild for a year and everyone behind to go train. Also, quickly before we even get into the next part, I absolutely love Natsu's outfit during this arc. The skull Tartaros outfit he gets is like his coolest outfit out of the whole series. Nothing has even came close to topping it. And the second reason being Gray's fight against Silver, which from the audience's perspective, going into this fight, we didn't know that Silver was actually Gray's dad. You did actually get a few context clues going into this, like that, Silver was Gray's dad. When Natsu first interacts with him, he says, Gray smells very similar to Silver, and also that Silver uses ice magic. I do kind of like Silver's plan that, he knew he died and he had been brought back to life by keys. And, he thought his whole family had died, and, he's the last surviving member. And he has this grand plan to go kill all the demons, in the name of his family, just to end up joining a demon guild and then trying to overthrow them someday. Which that plan eventually does get pretty messed up because, at some point down the line, he does end up doing pretty messed up things for Tartaros and finding out that Gray's alive again due to the Grand Magic Games. He finally wanted to die and be reunited with his wife. And I do like his, intentions were trying to be good on putting on the persona of being Deliora to try and get Gray to kill him and, get over his past trauma, which didn't exactly go the way he intended it to, because, Gray does eventually figure out that, he's not actually Deliora and he is just his father, but it does kind of help Gray get over his past trauma, which is a very nice final moment between, him and his son. Additionally, this battle actually kind of builds his relationship with Juvia a bit, since she's the one that defeated Keys, who had the grand control over his dad, and she set his dad's soul free. So Gray ended up being pretty thankful to Juvia for saving his dad, and that he didn't entirely have to fully kill him. Also, additionally, getting the new power-up of demon or devil slayer magic, which I just want to point this out because I find it very interesting. After he gets the demon slayer magic power-up in the manga, he ends up fighting Tempester immediately after he gets that and one-shots him. But in the anime, it's Loxus that has a rematch with him, and Gray is involved in, that fight, which is one of the very few times that the anime doesn't exactly follow the manga. I've always wondered exactly why they decided to switch that around to, not have Gray be able to fully showcase his powers off before he ends up fighting Mardgear, but I suppose that's maybe what they wanted to save it for. And the third example I have for this video is Lucy's fight against Tartaros, which up until this point, you always had people doubting Lucy's abilities. Early in the series, it definitely does make sense because, she had never had combat training, unlike her fellow guildmates, so she was going to have a disadvantage there. And she's one that didn't entirely love to get into fights. So most of the time in her fights, she was the underdog, and most of the time she won them using her mind. And even Lucy herself, before the Tartaros arc, had doubted herself quite a bit before this arc. But this arc really does show that if you push Lucy to her limit, she is willing to be a fighter, and how much of a fighter she can actually be. Lucy was the sole person to escape the Alegria spell, so she ended up being forced to single-handedly fight off Tartaros by herself. She switched through quite a few spirits, and pretty much things were getting more and more desperate as the fight went along, which eventually led to Lucy summoning an Aquarius, and Aquarius telling her to summon the Celestial Spirit King, which is honestly one of the saddest scenes in Fairy Tail when Lucy does find out that, she'd have to break one of her keys to summon him, which in Lucy's mind is literally like killing one of her friends, and in the case of Aquarius, one of the last memories of her mother. Which the whole scene of Aquarius trying to talk Lucy into doing it, since it's the only option to save her friends, is pretty darn sad. Which I do love that, Lucy and Aquarius, they get a moment before she summons in, the Celestial Spirit King of Aquarius, showing that she genuinely does care for Lucy and that she hopes that one day, they'll be able to meet again. I do like that, this gives Lucy a mission of her own to do because, Natsu, Gray, Urza, they all have their own ambitions on what they want to do. And now this gave Lucy her own thing she needed to do. As of even the current chapter of Fairy Tail, that's still Lucy's current side mission of trying to find Aquarius' key. This moment also gave Lucy single-handedly her best power-up in the whole series in the form of Star Dress, which I already did a full video talking about all of Lucy's star dresses in the past, if you want to go check that out. Which, unlike Natsu and Gray, where they had their loved one die, at least Lucy's ends on a happy note because she did save her friends, and she does have the mission now to go find Aquarius's key. Which, Lucy saving the guild, I've always loved this moment on how, she saved the guild, and, Natsu and the other members of the guild come to back her up and congratulate her on actually saving the guild. I think that really does show how integral Lucy is to part of the guild. And you do end up with a lot of symbolism between Natsu and Gray both losing their dads, and Lucy losing a memory of her mother. Which is kind of a side thing when I said the symbolism with Gray and their dads. Kind of fun in the Believe in Yourself opening. I thought it was like opening 21 for the Tartaros arc. You get Gray and Natsu walking, and it kind of shows a flash of their dad, their enemy, and then like you can interpret it as the person that they love. It's kind of fun that Gray and Natsu both get that, so you kind of get even more symbolism there. So on the other end of the spectrum, you have characters like Gajil and Levy, to where they started their relationship kind of quote unquote in Tartaros. You know what I'm talking about with the kiss scene. And you had Urza overcoming the torture that this arc put her through, along with, trying to overcome the torture that she had in her past. Tartaros on a whole had just a lot of stakes to it because, you had the whole face situation, which added a timer to things, which really did add a sense of desperation in all the actions of everyone involved in this arc, with the ending of this arc leaving a lot of scars on many of the guild members and, causing Makarov to disband Fairy Tail in the hopes of protecting all of the guild members, leading to a brand new Fairy Tail chapter beginning. So what did you guys think of the Tartaros arc? I absolutely love this arc, and I almost can't even fully describe how I really like this arc. I know it's really sad at times. Gosh dang, there's something about this arc that is just like top tier Fairy Tail. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and this is Drago signing out.